When you discover someone's darkest secret, they might lash out violently to protect it, even from beyond the grave. Today's episode features just that, along with an assortment of stories, cause I kinda just wanted to read random stories today during this winter storm. So stay warm and cozy out there, and enjoy these tales, ranging from unseen horrors driving pets to pure terror, to a getaway of friends going horribly wrong. Be sure to send me your scary stories so I can narrate them at darkstories.org. I'd love to narrate some stories soon about the Pine Barrens. Not just stories about the Jersey Devil, though. I'm hoping to see more than that. Also, be sure to check out my other shows, Freaky Folklore and Redwood Bureau on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more creepy content. Now, let's begin. Finding the knife angered it deeply. From Anonymous. I had to move many times as a child. A few times in South Carolina, several times in California, and a few times in Colorado. My first encounter with unexplainable phenomena was there, in a beautiful and remote area called Black Forest. Our newest living quarters were amazing, in the fact that they were located on a large piece of property with a shed full of strange items, like the jaws of a shark. It was perfect for a couple of young boys and a young girl to play in and explore. But the house was disappointing. It was very cramped and struggled to be what realtors enthusiastically referred to as rustic. A good deal of time went by, and from time to time some dogs would come by and stare at a swinging bench. We asked the neighbors about the dogs, and they informed us that the dogs belonged to the previous owner, who died in our new home. One neighbor was very confident that the dogs were coming to visit the spirit of the past resident. I was not privy to this information at the time, as my mother didn't see any good coming from telling me or my siblings about that unnerving idea. I wish she had. This routine went on for a while. The dogs wouldn't let us touch them. They would only permit us to watch, and we were not bothered enough to scare them away. Mom simply asked me to leave them be and never feed them. Times were different back then, as I don't think that many parents would allow that these days. But these dogs seemed happy and free, and were so at peace when they came to visit. Being a very curious child, I combed over the whole property until there was only one spot left that hadn't been explored, and that was the crawl space under the house. It was dark and musky, with only a few feet of space to crawl in. There were lots of spiders and some signs of rats, and it was creepy enough, but nothing too exciting for my adventurous 8-year-old self. Until I found it. While crawling, I noticed some kind of tool. I crawled over to it, and excitedly uncovered a 10-inch or so long kitchen knife. Not that exciting at first. It looked quite basic, but one detail of it sent chills down my spine. Along the stained blade was a color that I knew well from my escapades. Part of the blade was coated in a brownish-reddish substance that looked exactly like dried blood. I wondered why someone would leave a knife down here. I knew enough that if someone cut themselves, they would wash the knife after tending to the wound. I also couldn't think of a reason why someone would need to go into the crawlspace with a knife. Nothing bigger than a rat could get in here unless it unlocked and unlatched a door. Before I left the crawlspace, my theory was already forming. My guess was that someone hid the knife under the house after cutting someone else with it. I showed my brother and then my mother. My mother looked concerned and told me it was probably nothing. We then had our dinner and we all went to bed. The very next morning, I woke up as I normally do, by lifting my head a bit and looking around. The sun was shining, and the ambient light was sufficient enough to be able to read. From the window, my eyes panned to the corner of my room, when suddenly I was frozen with fear at the sight of a dark figure in the corner. It had the general shape of a human body. It was about the size of an average male, and it looked a bit hunched over and as though it was staring at me. When I gasped, basically as soon as it recognized that I could see it, it seemed to teleport to the left side of my bed, leaning over me. The more it leaned down, the more I felt a force pushing on my throat until I could not breathe. I thought I was going to die, but my will to live and instincts kicked in. I swung my left arm to do a barrel roll off the right side of the bed, and I screamed no at the same time. I hit the ground, now on my hands and knees, beginning to recover from maybe my first panic attack. I rubbed my throat, but I could no longer see that thing in my room. I told my mom, and thank goodness she believed me, so we didn't have to live there much longer. My tactic worked and the presence never disturbed me again. I couldn't help but think that it was related to the knife that I found. I never confirmed if it may have been related, but these kinds of coincidences don't happen often. My dog protected me. From Lucid Dreams 0224. This is a story I haven't told many people. I think the only ones who know the full thing are my best friend and ex-boyfriend. They were the ones I was talking to about the situation as it happened. I want to point out that it may not be the most exciting for some people, because it isn't quite like some of the creature encounters you might be used to, but it's still something that affects me to this day. I don't visit my mom often, but when I do, I always get an uneasy feeling at night. The thing that sparked this memory, though, and convinced me to finally write about it, was the fact that 9 out of my mom's 11 chickens have recently been killed by an animal that they cannot catch. I don't know if this event is related, but I really hope it's not. At the time of this story, I lived with my mother in rural South Dakota, in a tiny town. When I say tiny, I mean there were no more than 15 people in the whole town, if you could even call it a town. We lived at the very edge of this town on an acreage, which was surrounded by cornfields on 3 sides, and gravel roads that stretched for miles. There was a highway about a mile or 2 east of town, but you couldn't see it due to the cornfield much of the year, so it always felt pretty secluded. My family always had lots of pets. At this time, my mom had a little rat terrier and an old cat, and I had a big male German shepherd named Corvo, and a friendly cat the previous owners of the house just left when they moved, who I had taken in. For some context, on the night this takes place, my mom's dog was asleep in her bedroom, her cat was in the garage, and I was waiting for both of my pets to come inside for the night. It had to have been between 1 and 2 a.m. on the weekend, and everyone else was in bed. My cat, Lilith, was in the garage so she could go to the bathroom or get some food before I brought her in for the night, and I had just sent out Corvo as well. The night had gone on as usual, and at this time I was standing at the back door waiting for Corvo to do his business. That's when I noticed he wasn't moving from the deck. He would sometimes do that for a few minutes, just to look around, but he'd eventually do his thing and come back, so I didn't think much of it. That is, until he began to bark. Corvo was always quite protective, so if there was almost anything outside that he thought shouldn't be there, he would bark to show it who was boss, whether that was a coyote slinking through the trees or a plastic bag floating through the yard. But this time, it wasn't the same as usual. You see, Corvo was big and intimidating, sure, but he was never mean or aggressive. His barking was always just enough to let whatever was outside know he was there, which is how it started that night, until it changed. He started with the usual barking like most dogs do when they see something, but then it quickly turned to loud, deep barks, and then snarling. It sounded like he was telling something to get the heck away from his house. I didn't want him waking everybody up, so I opened the door to call him in. But instead of being greeted with my big dummy running inside and wagging his tail, I saw him standing with his back turned to me, the fur on the back of his neck standing all the way up as he stared into the backyard. I couldn't see a thing out of the ordinary out there, but he still growled and would not move from that protective stance, so I continued to call him inside. I even shook a bag of treats hoping it would snap him out of it, but got no reaction. So I did what most concerned dog owners would do and grabbed him by the collar. He wouldn't budge an inch. This was about 80 to 90 pounds of teed-off dog, so my efforts proved pretty pointless. He continued to growl and wouldn't even look at me. At this point, I didn't know what to do. He had never refused to listen to me before, and I hadn't seen him that way in a really long time. So I shut the screen door and left the inside one open, beginning to text my best friend and boyfriend at the time about the situation. They both responded fast, asking for a video, which I gave them. I don't know why I didn't save it, but I just checked, and unfortunately I don't have it anymore. After a few minutes of panicking and pondering what to do, I just decided to try calling him again. I know it may seem dumb to panic over, but I've struggled with anxiety and paranoia almost my whole life, so it was normal for me. After collecting myself, I took a deep breath, opened the door, and called out Corvo's name. To my surprise, he came right in. I quickly shut and locked the door, and I took a quick peek outside again, but saw nothing, so I assumed that was the end of it. Maybe there had just been a pack of coyotes that wandered too close for comfort, I thought. Looking back, I don't think I really believed that, but I was simply trying to convince myself I was overreacting. I tried to push away the uneasy feeling I had, and I went to go bring my cat inside and get to bed. Corvo didn't leave my side the whole time I was walking around, which wasn't exactly unusual, so I didn't think much more of it. Like I said before, he was just protective. As I was getting ready for bed, Corvo refused to move from my bedroom door. I even noticed Lily seemed on edge now as well. At this point, I was uneasy, and I was still texting people about what was happening. My friend told me to put protective items around the door and window, in case it was a spiritual thing. But my boyfriend, on the other hand, was being more logical, and told me to make sure all the doors were locked, and if I heard anything that could have been a person outside, to stealthily look out a window and call the police. I didn't know what to think. I was honestly just a huge bundle of nerves and wanted Corvo to comfort me, but still he wouldn't move from that spot. Eventually he hopped into bed with me, lying on my legs all without taking his eyes off the door for more than a second. This only lasted for a few minutes before things got worse. I was extremely unsettled at this point about the window my bed was pressed against. The shades were open the slightest crack, and I was shoved into the corner of my bed, too scared to close them or look outside. Corvo and Lily were definitely feeling it too, because they were both looking between me and the window. Then, all of a sudden, there was a slight sound outside, and Corvo hopped up and stuck his head through the curtains. He began barking just like he had outside, snarling too, making all sorts of sounds that I had never heard a dog make in person before. I was sobbing, trying to get him to stop without having to look out the window myself. I didn't know what was outside, and I didn't know if I wanted to know. The next thing I knew, I was in my parents' bedroom while he was still going crazy at that window. My parents had just woke up from the commotion from my room, which in turn caused their dog to start barking too. I was just told to shut my dog up and go back to bed. I was hysterical, telling them vaguely what was happening, but all I got was, "It's probably just a coyote," and "send him outside so he can get rid of it," which I absolutely was not about to do. I'm gonna be honest, my mom was never a very good parent, and I know that, which is why I don't live with her anymore. She had never been very good at comfort, so this wasn't anything new, and it's why I didn't push it. Besides, I hadn't actually seen what he was freaked out about. And the time I was out of the room, Corvo's barking had calmed to a much quieter but still audible growling, After getting back to my room, I somehow got the courage to take a picture through the curtains, and I did see something. It was off in the distance and barely visible, but I swear, I remember seeing green eyes reflecting the moonlight just at the edge of the trees. I honestly forgot about this detail until my friend reminded me when I asked her if she still had any pictures or videos that I'd sent her. I didn't sleep more than a couple of hours all night, and the whole time I was awake, Corvo stayed up with me and kept moving between the bedroom door and window, occasionally growling at something outside that I assumed was getting too close again. By morning, I'd awakened to him asleep on my bed, and he was very anxious to sniff around outside for the first time since the incident. I know this isn't a very exciting or scary ending, but this is one of the creepiest memories I have. I never did see much of what was outside, causing my dog to go berserk, and it never happened again, not to this extent anyway. This happened about November or December of 2020, and up until Corvo passed away in March 2021, due to unrelated causes thankfully, he would still occasionally growl at the tree line at night and wouldn't leave me alone outside. I'm so grateful for my dog and the people who tried to help me through this situation. If there's one thing to take away from this, it's always trust your pets. If they're uncomfortable, you should be too. Guy's Week Out, from Just Another Guy. I had a weird experience when I was in the South with my friends. The dad of my buddy, Ethan, owned a house in the South, and with Ethan's marriage having gone belly up, we thought it would be a good idea, since it was far away from his ex-wife, and it had been a long time since it was just us guys, to go stay at that house for a while. It didn't turn out as fun as we wanted it to be. Ethan rolled up to my house in his truck. I grabbed my stuff, and the moment we left my place, I heard all my other friends shouting at me. I smiled, because everyone was here. I tossed my stuff in the back and got in the truck. We all talked smack about his ex-wife, like how she was nothing but a gold digger, and stuff like that, which did make Ethan smile a few times. After a day or so, we finally got to the house, and we immediately began to unpack when we heard footsteps outside, coming towards us. I turned my head towards the footsteps, and I saw an old man outside walking our way. The old man had long, greasy gray hair with a big gray beard, and he was holding at least 5 big jugs, which were clearly filled with something. Can we help you, sir?" Mikey asked the man, who then put the jugs down and with a heavy accent replied,
"Well, I'll be. You must be Ethan, huh?"
Ethan replied, "Yeah, that's me, sir." The old man smiled.
"My lord, I only heard of you when you were born from your grandparents."
To which Ethan turned his head slightly.
"Don't worry, Slick, I'm sure you heard of me."
To which Ethan excitedly said, "Wait, Old Man Joe?" The old man chuckled.
"Just call me old Pa, boy."
Then he grabbed a few jugs. As the man walked up towards us, he said,
"Well, I'm sure you boys could use some of this, and take one to your gramps, all right?"
He laughed.
"I remember your grandpa liking my moonshine, so I hope you like it too."
He set the jugs on the ground, to which he then walked away, leaving us to ourselves. I grabbed one of them and opened it up to at least take a sniff of the moonshine that was in it. The smell hit me hard.
"Whoa, that is some heavy stuff, man," I said.
The rest of the guys laughed at me. We finished unpacking, did some fun stuff, and after dinner we started to relax with some beers. We talked about how we'd get Ethan another girl, but a good one this time. Ethan joked along with us. Suddenly, there was a loud thud outside. It startled us enough to make Mikey and Chester drop their beers. "What was that?" Mikey asked loudly. Ethan replied, "Maybe it's just old Pa grabbing a kill from hunting." I quickly told him, but we didn't hear a gunshot or anything like that." We looked at each other as another loud thud could be heard, but this time it was close to the house. Ethan got up and walked over to the front door. He opened it, but quickly slammed it shut. He looked horrified. "What is it, man?" Chester asked, but Ethan only whispered, "What is that?" Then a loud growl could be heard from the other side of the door, which was followed by tapping on the front door. Ethan slowly backed away from it as the tapping became a slow scratching, then turned into another growl. Then it stopped. There were a few more thuds, but these seemed to be moving away from us, and only when it was completely silent did Ethan slowly open the front door again. He popped his head out from behind it, then closed it again, releasing a sigh. He locked the door, walked into the kitchen, and poured himself some of the moonshine. To our surprise, he just gulped it down in one go. Finally, he spoke. I'm going to bed. I hope you guys do the same." We did just that. When I wanted to try and close the drapes of the window in my room, I looked outside too to see if I could see what he saw. There, I spotted something huge moving away from the house. It must have been about 7 feet tall, but it moved gracefully. I closed the drapes, and I went to sleep. The following morning, we didn't talk about what happened last night, so I didn't say anything about what I saw. The next few days went on without anything weird happening. We were only going to stay for 3 more days, but one night, the thuds came again. Before we knew it, there was a loud growl too, and hard slams against the front door. Terrified, I grabbed a big kitchen knife. The others were just standing there watching, waiting for something to happen. But the slams stopped. Then after a moment, something passed by the window. Something tall, thin, and hairy, slowly walking around the house. A slow growl could be heard with every step. This went on until the footsteps were at the front door. Then there came a loud howl. This was followed up by gunshots and thuds that moved away from the front door again. When we couldn't hear anything anymore, Ethan told us to start packing, because he wasn't staying here another night. He was going home, with or without us. Quickly, we all packed up. I grabbed the jugs of moonshine, and as I got back in the truck with everyone else, before I barely even sat down, Ethan floored it. As we drove away, I saw that tall, hairy figure again. It ran alongside the truck in the forested area nearby. When we entered the highway, it stopped following us. We stopped at a motel to catch up on some sleep. In the morning, we went home. My fiancée was surprised to see me home days early. I told her about what happened. She said that she saw something similar when she went to visit her mother. Ethan did tell me that his grandparents told him that whatever it was that was there with us was the reason they never went back to that house ever again. I wish I'd known that beforehand. Beast of the Pine Barrens. From Captain Clash SF. Over the summer, my friends and I were working at a summer camp. We finished early on a Wednesday night and got permission to leave camp for a few hours. We climbed into my friend's RV, traveling to the Pine Barrens, which was about an hour-and-a-half drive from the camp. We arrived and went to a campsite, parking the RV so that we could get out and explore for a few hours until we had to return back to camp. I climbed out of the RV and made it to the left side, where he stored his camping equipment. I grabbed a headlamp, flashlight, water bottle, and a pair of gloves, as we would be walking through the brush and all that. I got all my things ready, and my friends and I left the RV, making our way to a trail. We followed this trail for about 2.5 miles, until we stumbled upon a makeshift campsite off the trail and a couple of yards into the woods. We walked over to explore and found a tent ripped up, and everything that had been in the tent was now spread all throughout the area and in the fire pit. I was curious and decided to poke around, discovering spots of blood on the ground. I alerted my friends and we quickly began to yell out, seeing if anyone was out there. After getting no response, we made our way deeper into the woods, searching for any signs of people. As we went deeper, the trees became thicker and it became more difficult to see in the distance. We walked for about 45 minutes until we stumbled across a clearing. In the center of it was this old tree that had been struck by lightning several times, it appeared. My friend then stopped and told the rest of us we shouldn't go any further, as that's the devil tree, where, supposedly, a bunch of cultists liked to come here back in the early 90s. However, my other friends and I wanted to go check out the tree, so we left our friend behind and made our way to the tree. When we got there, we noticed this weird drawing on the ground, like some sort of star or something, and there were candles all around it. By then, I was getting chills down my spine, and I wanted to get the heck out of there. I began to walk away when I heard an ear-splitting screech. My friends and I looked around and saw the friend that we'd left behind tearing through the clearing towards us. We rushed towards him and asked what the heck was going on. He told us he saw this coyote that looked weird staring at him, watching him through the brush. At this point, my friends and I were about to leave when another scream filled the air. We all looked at one another and began scanning the area when, I kid you not, I saw what I now believe to be the Jersey Devil. It was this weird goat-like thing standing on its hind legs watching us. I looked for the wings and other signs, but as it was dark, I couldn't tell exactly what it was. After pointing this out to my friends, we began to run, making a mad dash for the trees as that thing was running alongside us. I got a good look at it, and it looked like a human but had horns coming out of its head and hooves for feet. At that point, I was so scared I soiled myself and ran even faster, pushing my body to the limit. We soon made it back to the trees, where that thing ran in, letting out another scream before disappearing. We rushed through the trees and made it back to the RV within 50 minutes. When we got back, the police were there, looking around the RV. There were deep scratches on the side, and the passenger and driver windows were now shattered. That's my story of the Pine Barrens, and why I will not return. That brings us to the end of this episode of Darkness Prevails. More terrifying stories are on the way soon, so subscribe and smash that like button. By the way, did you know this show is available as a podcast called Unexplained Encounters? Just search for, follow, and rate Unexplained Encounters on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. This show is part of the EerieCast network. Go to EerieCast.com for more scary podcasts, such as Freaky Folklore, which explores your favorite monsters, myths, and mysteries, as well as Redwood Bureau, a fictional horror podcast about an agent on the run from an evil secret organization that captures supernatural creatures and entities. Well, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.